Session. Alrighty, is Wayne in the room? Ask me how I know. You haven't asked me how I know. So we're going to start this session with another Ask Me How I Know. I've got a couple. I've got Bo and Jake at this point. So if you haven't asked me how I know, sign up. Ready?
Did you know that if you take your fermenting kefir and you seal it up tight, oval in your mason jar about the size of a dime? Ask me how I know.
I have a related one. Did you know if you seal down that wine you're fermenting, this is from my dad, not only will you have a hole in the carboy you're fermenting it, apparently you will have a very angry wife, also known as mama sauce, and red wine shooting around the corner with glass. Fermenting things need to off gas. Okay, so we're going to segue into the proper human diet with Dr. Ken Berry. Who's never heard of him? Okay. I'm going to let Dr. Ken Berry tell his story, but he has been responsible for a reduction in bottom size in this room that is very visible from year to year. So I'm just going to hand that over. It's not the only reason to change, but there we go.
Hello. Hola. I've always wanted to say this. Listen here, you hicks and rednecks. Yeah. Listen here. So I'm Dr. Ken Berry, I'm friend here. I've been practicing family medicine as an MD for over 20 years. Earlier in my career, I was severely obese, pre-diabetic, and had a long list of medical problems. And as people say, do you think I have an accent? I don't have it. Really? So as a Southern boy, shit needs to make sense, right? 1 + 1's 2, whether you like it or not, blah, blah, blah. And so it was really hard for me to be a fat pre-diabetic doctor and then going, you need to lose a few pounds. And, so the common sense people I was around, when I would say that, they would look down at this button right here. It was in danger of popping at any minute. And they look back up and be like, oh, okay, doc. Very incongruous. I didn't like that. So this is the culmination of me trying to fix myself because I adopted the American Diabetes Association guidelines. That's what any doctor would do if you're pre-diabetic and obese, right? I did that and actually gained weight and got more pre-diabetic. So at that point, I was like, am indeed a special snowflake. But then I would look at the statistics of pre-diabetes, type 2 diabetes, obesity, metabolic syndrome. I'm like, no, everybody's fat and metabolically sick. So it's not just me. So this is the culmination of about 4 years of super deep research that continues even today. That's what this is all based on. Now, do we have anybody in the room, and please be honest, who is a vegan or a vegetarian or eats a predominantly plant-based diet because you think is the best way for a human to eat? Do we have anybody? It's okay. Me and Jack will still love you. Okay, so we don't have but then you wised up. Okay, good. So I'm so glad that Jack did his presentation because now you've kind of got a bedrock foundation of where all this comes from, because these are the disciplines that I pull everything I talk about from. And most doctors get lots of education in medicine. They're doctors. They get a little bit of education in human nutrition. But when they get zero, and if you even suggested to a medical school president, you should have a course on paleoanthropology, they'd be like, who are you? That'd be lunacy to them. Like, what are you talking about? And my comment to Jack, I kind of alluded to that. Doesn't it seem important to you that we should know what humans ate 1,000 years ago? That seems like, and we should study that and we should look at that. What about 10,000 years ago? What about 100,000 years ago? That stuff's actually, that's more important than modern nutrition education. Because I probably will bring goals at some point. And so nutrition research has been almost entirely hijacked by corporate interests. So has medical research. And anybody with any degree of common sense and honesty is going to tell you, yeah, that's true. Okay. So everybody knows that pomegranate juice is very healthy. It's a superfood, blah, blah, blah. Do you know that every single bit of the pomegranate and Palm Wonderful research was sponsored and designed by the multi-million-dollar corporation in California that owns thousands of trees? Appeals to you most, right? Whatever, right? And they also own thousands of acres of almond trees. And you, about once a month, you'll see a new research study shows that almonds, whatever, right? That's been completely co-opted. And so they sponsor the research and then they design the research. And if the research turns out that it doesn't show what they wanted it to show, do they have any duty to publish that? Bury that research and it never sees the light of day? What if they got, okay, here's a question. What if they got a federal grant, federal money to sponsor that research? And then it turns out they don't really like the results. This goes for not only food, but pharmaceuticals as well. Do they have any duty to publish that? Shake your head. Nope. They can hide it. They can bury it and never see the light of day. What about the data? When they research a big new pharmaceutical pill and they get lots of government grants from the NIH and other places, all that raw data, because that's what a scientist wants. Raw, they can really dig into it and see if it was done right. Does the federal government get access to that raw data? Does anybody except that corporation and people who've signed an NDA? Nobody ever sees that. And that's one of the big problems with cholesterol, is that all these research studies that seem to show at least some benefit for the statins and other cholesterol lowering medications, nobody has access to the raw data. And so we all know human nature and common sense, right? So if Jack and I we have a corporation and we've got a new blockbuster product that could potentially make us billions of dollars, there's some human nature that goes on there. If something pops up that's a little less than great, what are we going to do with that? It's not going to kill anybody abruptly, but it might not be ideal that that's the case. We're going to hide that. Human nature, right? We've all done that at some degree. Maybe in third grade when you stole the teacher's chalk and you're like, I don't know what happened to that chalk. That's human nature. We're going to stretch the truth as much as need to be stretched, but not to the point where we're going to kill people acutely, because then the attorneys, we got a couple in the room. What do you guys do if a corporation kills people acutely? Sue ass, right? But what if they kill them over 20 to 40 years? Very gradual, very slow decline, kind of mirrors aging. Would you want to take that case? You can't prove it. Can't prove liability. You can't prove malice. You can't prove mens rea. You can't prove any of that because it was over such a long time scale. Maybe the guy just got old and died. No attorney wants to take that case. But with all this raw data being hidden, are there potentially lawsuits in there? Because if they misled with the research results and it was just absolute deception and then people were harmed, any attorney's going to take that case, but nobody can get the raw data. So out of a culmination of my deep dive into all these things, including the things Jack talked about, I've got what I call a proper human diet. And I'm going to keep this very brief because I want to take a lot of questions from you guys. because I think that helps people learn when they hear the question. They're like, yeah, I want to know that too, and then I answer the question. So there's a list of principles of a proper human diet. It's by definition very low carbohydrate. Okay, there's no such thing as a proper human diet that's high in carbohydrates. It's by definition nutrient dense. The reason that we eat food is for nutrition, right? It's by definition uninflammatory. It's not going to flare up your gut or your joints or your skin or your brain. It's not going to cause any of that kind of chronic inappropriate inflammation. It's ancestrally appropriate, which Jack laid the foundation for, right? And I've picked my arbitrary cutoff. We all have to have arbitrary cutoffs. Is greater than 15,000 years ago. That takes us back before the Younger Dryas. That takes us back before the calamities that happened. And nobody knows happened yet. There's some excellent hypotheses that I think are probably true, but in truth, we don't know what happened. All we know is all these megafauna disappeared. A proper human diet is all those things. Okay. So when you get these principles, then you're like, oh, okay. So I can kind of make a case for each food. When somebody puts something on my plate, I can go, okay, should I eat that or not? Now I'm not talking about an occasional rare treat or snack. I'm talking about what do you eat on a daily basis? Because that's what's either going to lead to disease or it's going to lead to you living a long, healthy, vibrant life. Now, also we come quickly to the question, does the diet that you eat, does it optimize your health or does it just keep you from starving to death? Because those are two very different yet very important things. And so if you're faced with a starvation situation, you should eat all the beans and rice, right? Because starving to death is you die and then you're not alive anymore and then you're dead and then you're done. So yes, in that scenario, you eat all the beans and rice. You eat all the Hostess Twinkies and cupcakes. You eat all that because it will keep you starving. But if what you're looking to do is improve your health and optimize your health, then you don't eat those starvation foods. Okay, and we see time and time again in the archaeological and anthropological literature that this diet is what the rulers ate. And this diet is what the slaves and the prisoners ate. And so the diet that the American Diabetes Association and the American Heart Association and the Eat Lancet, have you heard of those guys? They're a huge global conglomerate. The diet that they are telling you that is healthiest for human beings is a slave diet based on no controlled research that shows that it actually improves the health of any human. Also, no controlled research that shows that it doesn't harm the health of any human. There's no research backing the Eat Lancet diet, the ADA diet, the American Heart Association diet. Yet that's what they're vocally, loudly proclaiming that we should all eat. Does that make you go, Does that make you wonder what the hell's going on? So we got 8.5 billion people on the planet right now. And they're not going to be able to feed us all. And that's a valid concern. I get that. Also, all of these big ADA, AHA, AMA, Eat Lancet, they're all get all their corporate donations. Okay. And your little fund drive that you have for the American Heart Association every year in your little community, they don't give a shit about that. Okay. Because they have pharmaceutical companies that give them $1 million check, $2 million check. Okay. So when you eat this diet, first of all, you can scale a slave diet. You know what I mean by that? You manufacture it in China out of wheat, rice, oats, corn, sugar, and vegetable oil. Package it up in plastic. Let it sit in a warehouse a month. Then you can ship it over on a container ship. And then you can store it in a warehouse in San Jose for 6 months. Then you can put it on a truck and move it out to a grocery store. And it can sit on the grocery store shelf for another 6 months and still be considered fresh. Okay? You cannot do that with real food. Real food's not scalable. Okay? When you eat a slave diet, they can make billions of dollars. They can mass produce it, mass ship it, mass market it, and then it's shelf stable. We can sit on the shelf for 2 years because even the cockroaches won't eat it. But we're dumb enough to eat it. Does that make sense? But a proper human diet is not scalable. You cannot scale up ribeye to a worldwide scale. It doesn't work because it goes bad or varmints eat it. You see the difference? So why would the big corporations, especially the big food and big pharma, why would they be so interested in you eating a slave diet? Why does that matter to them so? Yeah, because when you eat a slave diet, what's your blood sugar do? Goes up. What's your blood pressure do? Goes up. What's your waistline do? Goes up. So can you see why Big Pharma would be okay with that? Yeah, they love that because they get a pill for that. What if it increased the rate of mental illness? Which more and more research is coming out that it does. They got a pill for that. They got a bunch of pills for that, right? Why would big food be so interested in promoting a slave diet? Because like for the average ribeye that comes from the rancher, goes through the process and winds up on the Kroger shelf. You know what the markup is on that from all the way up the chain? 50, 60%. That's it. That's all the markup. No multi-billion-dollar corporation is interested in 30, 40, 50% markup. That doesn't fit their profit model. When you make something out of sugar, grain, and a vegetable seed oil, you know what the markup is on that all the way up the chain? It's somewhere between 1,100% and 1,500%. Now they're in. You see the difference? So big food makes billions and big pharma makes billions, and you get slowly sicker and slowly fatter, slowly but surely decrepit, disabled. Then you lose a toe, then you have a heart attack, and then you have a stroke, and then you're in the nursing home. Oh, and so big medicine, let's talk about that, the huge medical conglomerates. Do they profit when you eat this diet? Think about it. All the procedures, all the hospital stays, right? So that's why I got this in front of CEOs or corporations. They have no interest in this because there's no profit to be made here. And I decided very early in this, I'm not going to try to change the ADA guidelines. I'm going to go to you guys and I'm going to say, hey, let's think about this for a minute. How many people in this room, based on what I've said or Jack said, have substantially improved your health over the last year or two? Look at the hands. Okay. So that's just anecdotal evidence. That doesn't prove anything. That's true. These are pretty much no bullshit people. And if Jack or I were full of shit, at least about that particular thing, they would all say, yeah, I tried it. Nah, I don't know. Yeah. Right? Just like when you bought that new thing you saw advertised on TV. And initially you were like, oh, this is great. And then 6 months later, you're like, where's that thing? Hell, I don't know. It's in the closet somewhere. I don't know. I don't never even think about that anymore. What in the world is the power of this proper human diet that 2 years later, there are still people that every meal they think about these principles and these concepts and they follow them because they remember how they used to feel. So to perform. And they don't ever want to go back. And I never want to be severely obese and pre-diabetic and pissed off and cantankerous and ill. How much easier is it to live with Jack now versus back when he used to eat the beans and rice? Don't lie.
Think of when we go out and we didn't eat, and I would get Psycho Jack. Okay. That's all gone, right? Psycho Jack's gone, but it's still pretty.
Dorothy's a saint. Can I just say? So I think I want to open it up for questions. So every food that you can possibly eat on the earth is made up of 3 different macronutrients. Okay? Protein, carbohydrates, and fat. That's what every food is made up of, some ratio of those 3 things. Okay? Now there's a particular ratio. So I've already said this. So you know the carbs have got to be low. Now, the only people who will tell you that you don't have to eat it all are breatharians, and they don't tend to, they're either dishonest or they die, because you got to eat food. All mammals have to eat food. So if you keep the carbs that you choose from, and that's fat and protein in some ratio. Some people love high protein, adequate fat. Some people love high fat, adequate protein. I don't care which one you do, because you're going to be much healthier than when you're eating high carb. Now, with Jack's presentation as baseline and this information as baseline, I want to take as many questions from you guys as you have questions, because I think that helps people the most when they ask their particular question.
So I'm interested in trying your BBBE challenge, bacon butter. So one video you mentioned beef can be any ruminant.
That's right.
But why not pork or chicken?
Yeah. So ruminant animals. And so also I guess I should add mammalogy in with this as well, because so cows, sheep, goats, camels, reindeer, they are ruminant animals, which means they have a multi-chamber stomach, which means you can literally feed them anything of a plant nature, and the bacteria and microbes in their gut can break that down and turn that into one of the most nutrient dense foods on the planet, which is meat, fatty meat. Are monogastric, which means they have one, they're just like us. They just have a gullet. They eat it, and then they don't have the filtration. They don't have the trillions of microbes in their gut to break down and get rid of the trash and the toxins. So that's why ruminant meat is so important. All of the megafauna that Jack was talking about, the vast majority of them were what? Ruminants. Yeah. So that's why ruminant animals, that needs to be the majority of your meat. Now some carnivores, and so back to my story. Cut the carbs, cut the junk, cut the sugar, cut the price, the hi-ho crackers, and whatever that fucking shit is back there that people have been eating with their coffee. Peanut butter cups, yeah. And that took me a little ways, but it didn't get me where I wanted to go. And then I heard about keto. I'm like, oh, let me look into this. Okay, cut the carbs more, up the fat. Boom. Man, I started losing weight like crazy. My type 2 pre-diabetes went completely away. Heartburn got 80% better. All the other medical things I was having that I thought were permanent parts of who I was for the rest of my life started getting. Facebook page, let's do a 1 month carnivore challenge, nothing but meat and eggs for 30 days. And at the end of that, so many of those conditions that I thought were just chronic, part of what I had to look forward to, were completely gone. And I said, I think I'm going to do that another month. And I've been doing that another month and another month for the last 3.5, 4 years. And so I'm 99% of the food I eat is animal based food. Fatty meat and eggs. And I will eat some chicken occasionally. I will eat some pork occasionally, but the vast majority of what I eat is ruminant meat and eggs with the yolk. Do not ever come at me with omelet you in the somewhere. Don't do that. The yolks are a superfood. They're full of remember the nutrient density, right? Fatty acids, amino acids, vitamins, and minerals. That's why we eat fatty red meat and the yolk of eggs. That has them all. Make sense? Yes, sir. Come on, guys. Don't be shy. Any question. It can be about medical conditions. It can be about medications. It can be about any food topic. It can be about what Jack talked about. I'd love to riff a little bit about that.
So I travel a ton for work.
Yep.
Recommendation away from, or eating. I pretty much eat out at restaurants almost 2 weeks out of the month.
Yeah, you can 100% do a proper human diet in a restaurant. You can do it in a truck stop. Okay. It takes a little bit of knowledge, which you now have. It takes a little bit of patience, and it takes a little bit of willpower, and it takes a little bit of ain't nobody wants to hear that whiny bullshit but your mama, and she ain't here, right? Because it is harder to eat proper on the road. There's no doubt about that, but it's 100% doable. Every truck stop I've ever been to has beef jerky. They have hot dogs in the hot bar. They have boiled eggs in the cold case. You can do that. It's a little more challenging. Most truck drivers have a little tiny kitchenette set up in the truck. They can have a igloo cooler and cook that stuff. There's no excuse, but it is a little more difficult, granted.
I had a gentleman, I was explaining the carnivore diet to him, and I mean, I know the answer to this, but I'd like for you to answer it for everybody else.
Sure.
He said, oh, you got to stop that every once in a while. You're going to kill your kidneys. You got to be careful with that.
Right.
So I just want you to.
Yeah. Back in 2003, I sent a patient to a kidney specialist, and they came back to me for follow-up visit. Eating meat because it was bad for my kidneys. And I was like, when I think back to my biochemistry and physiology, the first 2 years of med school, I don't remember how that works exactly. And so I started looking into it. And even back in 2003, you could do an internet search for protein hurts kidneys myth. That's what I searched for. And there was over 100 articles back in 2003 that was a bullshit myth, that nobody understood. Even nephrologists, kidney specialists had no idea why people kept saying that. And by people, I mean doctors. Why do they keep saying that? There's no research to support that whatsoever. Research carb diet leads to hyperinsulinemia, prediabetes, type 2 diabetes, metabolic syndrome, and all those things will destroy your kidneys. But there's no research that shows that a protein diet, even a very high protein diet, harms the human kidney in any way. So even back in 2003, this was a known myth. And I think I actually have a chapter in my book, Lies My Doctor Told Me, about this, and where I go into more detail. But it's a complete and utter myth. There is no research in human physiology or biochemistry where eating a 100% exclusive red meat diet in any way.
So with the cost of certain kinds of beef being kind of pricey, and that being your primary thing to eat, ground beef being a little bit cheaper, what are your preferred methods of eating ground beef? Yeah, ground beef is fine. In some countries, they call that minced beef. That's 100% fine as long as it's 100% cow, and it's preferably got a 70-30 ratio. 80-20 is not bad. Don't buy the 85-15. That's too lean. 70-30 is perfect if you can find it, and that's actually usually cheaper. And if you have a butcher, you can actually get 60. Really, that's about perfection for a human being. Because all those animals that Jack showed on the screen, what were they full of? Fat. And so the way you tie all this together is we were eating those animals for over the last 100,000 years. We've only been eating canola oil and some soybean oil for the last 60, 70 years. But yet every time a new article comes out, oh, canola oil, oh, soy oil. Is kind of research you can do that show definitively if you take away the animal fat from a person's diet and replace it with, in all three studies, they use corn oil because that was the popular vegetable at the time. And they did this research thinking this will prove it once and for all. Okay. And I've got a video in the can right now that'll be on my YouTube channel by the end of next week about these three studies. All three studies showed without a doubt that when you replace saturated animal fat with corn oil, people have more heart attacks, they have more heart disease, they have more early death from all causes of mortality. All three studies showed that definitively. Now, one study was published back in the 60s in a very kind of a throwaway journal. The other two studies, although they were done in the 60s, one was published in 2013 in the BMJ. The other was published in 2016 in the BMJ. They were done in the 60s, showed definitively keep the saturated animal fat in your diet. It's the vegetable oil, but they weren't published for decades. What happened there? They had a hypothesis that vegetable oil is healthier than saturated animal fat. Their study did not in any way support that whatsoever. It actually showed the exact opposite. So they buried the data. In one case, the data was found by one of the researchers' children who was an adult going through dad's stuff. Dad had passed away, and he found all these boxes of the tapes that computers used to use. And he's like, what is this? I don't know. And just so happened there was a reporter who was going to interview him about his dad because he's a very famous researcher. And he's like, I don't know. I found all these tapes. You want to check them and see what it is? It was the study that was done in the 60s. It's called the Minnesota Heart Study. Dr. Ansel Keys. Anybody ever heard of him? Yeah. He knew that vegetable oil was dangerous. And he hid the data. He put it in the basement or up in the attic. It sat there for decades. And his son, going through his dead father's shit, found it, gave it to a reporter. And the reporter, when they crunched all the data, then BMJ published it in 2013. The other was the Sydney Heart Study. Same exact study. Now, one of these studies, so let me just go through quick. Okay. So the way studies are done, there's very low quality evidence, and then there's very compelling high quality evidence that can actually show a causation. Observational research, that's what the majority of nutrition research is. They'll give you a food frequency questionnaire, which is a multiple choice guess. They'll say, Jack, how many cups of ribs have you eaten in the last month? First of all, who measures ribs in fucking cups? And then secondly, who knows? I don't know. Unless you're a carnivore, you makes up. And they do that with tens of thousands of people. They'll do it at the beginning of the study, then they'll do it 5 years later, and then they'll do it 10 years later. Then they crunch all that data. Nicole, is that giving you a migraine to call that data? Like, is that truly data? It sounds like some guessed at bullshit to me. But then they'll publish that in a reputable journal, but that's called observational data. Cohort studies, cross-sectional studies. That kind of research, by definition, can never show causation. It can only show a possible association. So all of these studies that you see once a week in USA Today and MSNBC and Fox News and CNN, they're all observational studies. They cannot, by definition, show causation. So when they say meat kills, eat plants, that's the literal title. That's bullshit. That's them trying to get you to eat a slave diet. That's what that is. Now, they may not be conscious of that as a reporter. They just may know that this kind of story is, my editor approves this story. When I try to do a story about carnivore, that don't get approved. So obviously I want to get lots of stories published. Right? So these guys, the guys that John talked about, they're great at manipulating human nature at the corporate level. That's basically what they do, right? Now, when you get up to the very top of research that can actually prove A caused B, it has to be randomized research. It has to be controlled research. And in one of these studies that went on for 8 years, it was actually double-blinded. So the researchers didn't know what kind of fat they were getting, nor did the patients know what kind of fat getting. So that's the most powerful kind of research you can do. Okay, that's a randomized controlled trial that's double-blinded. And you don't have to remember that. You just have to understand that the only research on vegetable oil that was of a high enough quality of research to actually show A caused B showed, without exception, there's been 3 studies ever done, and they all 3 showed that vegetable oil will increase your risk of dying prematurely, will increase your risk of having a heart attack, and will increase your risk of having heart disease. And every single researcher working on the projects believed that vegetable oil was. They went into the research believing that. So you can understand how their bias didn't reach into the study and the results because it was controlled. Does that make sense? So when they say, oh, there's a new study that shows that you should drink Palm Wonderful and eat almonds and never eat red meat again. Most people read the headline and move on. But if you start to dig into that, you'll be like, a cohort study, a cross-sectional analysis, that's observational. That doesn't prove anything. It literally proves nothing. But yet that studies that I told you about, that I'm going to make a video about, nobody talks about those, do they? Now, once a healthcare provider knows that there is a randomized controlled trial that's double-blinded that shows definitively that vegetable oil is dangerous, it will increase your risk of dying. Does that physician now have a duty to not recommend the thing that was shown in a randomized controlled trial that's double-blinded? They have an ethical duty at that point, don't they? And so when that video comes out, I want you guys to watch that video and hit that thumb. But to print out all 3 of those research studies. There's a link in the show notes. And I want you to take those studies to your doctor, especially if your doctor's ever said you should eat plant-based or stop eating animal fat, don't eat red meat, any of that kind of bullshit. I want you to take them and say, read this. Then when you go back in 3 or 6 months, say, did you read those? And if they say, I forgot, I don't know, whatever, keep bugging them, because once they read those studies, they're under oath to do no harm, aren't they? Oh. Now, the attorney's ears just perked up right there. It's like, wait a minute. You knew there was blinded that were in humans, not in mice, guinea pigs, or monkeys, in humans that replaced saturated animal fat with vegetable oil that actually caused harm. You were aware of those 3 studies, doctor, but you still told all your patients to stop using lard and to use canola oil. I think our attorney might take that case. He'd be like, oh, wait a minute, there might be something there. Send me the patient records. Let me look over that. There might be something there, right? Yes.
Well, let me get one from online first.
Shit,
Hatch,
yeah.
What's the one from online?
Throwing it up there. Do you agree with Bart K's thoughts on calories?
Yeah, I agree with Bart K about a great many things. Calories, and Jack and I have had this discussion before. So calories are a unit of heat measurement, right? And the laws of thermodynamics, and you know how, if you don't know what that is, it's fine. Don't worry about it. But they apply only to a closed system. That's a physical concept. The human body is not a closed system. I'm being exposed to the air right now. I'm losing my clothes on, so that's minimizing my heat loss and also protecting your eyes, right? I drank some coffee. What about that? Did that raise my temperature or lower? It depends on what kind of coffee you like. The human body's not a closed system. So anybody who says calories in, calories out, that's all you have to worry about. Just move more and eat less. Calorie restriction, calorie deficit, any of those kind of key words, you can right then hit the unfollow button, because they're trying to apply the laws of thermodynamics, which are designed for closed systems. They're trying to apply that to a. See if you guys have urinated today. How many calories of heat energy did you leave in the pot? You don't know, do you? So my take on calories is that your calorie intake and your calorie needs is an unknowable number. So anybody who says, oh, I've got this calculator on my website, just put in your height and your age and your weight and your activity level, and I can tell you how many calories you need a day, they're full of shit. That is an unknowable number that you literally would need calculus to even get close to calculating, and it would still be plus or minus 10. energy expenditure. What's your body temperature? Well, it's 98.6. Well, now wait a minute. Is it? You know that 98.6, that's just the mean temperature of human beings, right? That's not everybody's temperature. A lot of people, including some doctors, believe that. So are you going to use that 37 degrees Celsius? Is that going to be what you do your calculations on? What if my baseline body temperature is 98.2 or 98.9? That changes it, right? So again, how many calories you burn a day is a literal unknowable number that you would need calculus and probably a super you keep eating this, because this is low calorie, also nutrient void, but it's very low calorie. This is not low calorie. Okay, if you're eating ribeye and eggs with the yolk, that's not low calorie. But yet, how are all these people losing all this weight? Aren't they cutting back on calories? No. Metabolization and utilization of stored fat, which is what you're trying to do when you say I want to lose weight, you really want to get rid of too much stored fat. That's biochemistry. That's physiology.
Dr. Barry, I love cold beer as much as I love nearly anything in life. Cold beer is like in my top 5 favorites. I'm just not going to drink Michelob Ultra. I'm just not going to. So is there any place for like the tequilas, vodkas, gins, or is this like a mutually exclusive one or the other?
Yeah, good question. So first of all, if any of you guys do lots of beer's for high school boys, grow the fuck up. Small batch IPA, I don't care. Beer's for teenage boys. Grow up, okay? Now, with that being said, to the adults in the room, all alcohol, without exception, is poison by definition. Any doctor, any nutritionist, anybody who's going to be honest with you and who knows their physiology, they know alcohol is poison. Okay, and you can say, well, the dose makes the poison. Yeah, true. So if one holiday, is that going to hurt you? Probably not. It's probably not a big deal. If you drink enough alcohol, it'll kill you acutely. Then our attorney will be interested in that, right? But if you drink, I'll just have a drink every night. Yeah, it's not going to kill you acutely, but it absolutely has to be broken down by your liver. It does damage to your liver. Now, with all that being said, do I have an occasional drink? Yeah. I had some of Jack's whiskey last night. The good stuff. Dorothy told me where it was. But never am I going to. And so where this really comes into play, remember all the articles about how a glass of red wine is good for your heart? What kind of research was that based on? Observational research did not show any causation. It was a possible association. People who drink wine with dinner tend to be a little healthier, a little younger, a little more affluent. A little more money. They probably have a college degree. So how many other things in their life are different from the fat boy that still lives with his mama in the trailer and has Lucky Charms for breakfast and ding dongs for lunch and a hungry man for dinner? A lot of things are different, right? Observation see all those things. All it can say is, did you drink red wine or not? Okay, we crunch the numbers. Here you go. There's a relative risk of this. That's a study. We can get that published, and then CNN will run that. That was all bullshit. Complete bullshit. There is no alcohol on the planet that by drinking it, it will improve your health. That is a myth. With that being said, can my friend have an ounce of vodka or an ounce of bourbon every now and then? It's probably no big deal, as long as it's occasional, right? But if you're having 1 or 2 drinks a night, that can be 1 or 2 glasses of wine, 1 or 2 beers. If you're still 12, I know. I'm trying to get my leaks in while I can. So you guys will be on your own soon. And I want my voice in your head going, hey, grow up. After the party. Yeah. 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 So does any follow-up questions about alcohol? Okay.
What's the difference between dark and light liquors?
The color. Yeah, alcohol is alcohol. It's a specific molecule that we studied in biochemistry. We actually made our own alcohol.
Don't we have a demo of that, Jack?
In biochemistry class. And for years, I had it in a test tube up on my Granny Berry's refrigerator. I was so proud that I'd made my own alcohol. And every now and then I'd pop the cork and smell it. I was like, yeah, it's alcohol. I made it. And put it back up there. I was so proud of that. There's no difference in the alcohol. It's just the extra stuff. And in many cases, brown alcohol, they just put some caramel coloring in it. Literally, that's all they did.
We made brown alcohol that we could show you at some point.
Yeah. No, you don't have to, but that in many
we did
cases.
Not use sugar. I know.
Yeah, yeah. And so the app.
And we're going to drink here. Sorry, Ken. But seriously, like, you really want to moderate your sugar intake if you're having alcohol at the same time, especially fructose, because you can back this up. Your liver processes ethyl alcohol and fructose like 99.9% the same way.
Exactly.
There's one
right.
little difference in that.
Yep.
And it can't do.
Have a tequila sunrise or a Mai Tai. You're literally just kicked your liver in the balls is what you did.
Because it won't get rid of the fructose until it gets rid of the alcohol.
So it winds up storing the fructose as fat in your liver.
So to me, what that means, you tell me what you think of this, that means that your body has decided that fructose is a slightly less toxic substance than ethanol.
Exactly right. Exactly right. So with that information, later this evening, you can do whatever you want because you're a grown-ass human.
All right.
So I like your 3-study plot to start a class action law. There's a fourth macro creeping into our food chain. How do we protect ourselves against microplastics that we're hearing now? It's like everything.
Yeah. So microplastics are potentially a big problem. So I try to go by what the research shows. So currently the research shows that microplastics and nanoplastics are ubiquitous. That means they're in everything. Okay. Every time you wash your clothes, microscopic amounts of plastic come off. They get in the air. They're everywhere. You breathe them in. If I did a lung biopsy on you, you've got nanoplastics in your lungs. Your daughter just had a baby. Her placental lining, you'd think that's pretty pristine. Microplastics have been found. Okay. In the bloodstream, they're everywhere. Now, the thing we don't have yet is obviously it sounds pretty fucking bad, right? That sounds bad. But we have no research yet showing that it's bad. And so I hesitate saying that's terrible. But, you know, common sense, that's probably bad. But this is one of the many things that my question is, okay, what are you going to do about that? The only thing you currently can do about that is go live in Antarctica. Literally, that, and now they've also found them there. Sorry, yeah, maybe Mars. You and Elon can go to Mars and then there won't be. But we'll try to talk about is things you can actually go home and change. And you can't do shit about microplastics. They're everywhere. The only one thing you can do is eat real salt that's mined from under the earth, not from the evaporated modern ocean. And a lot of people think that sea salt, it's from this bay in the Chesapeake, and no, that's just shitty ocean water. That's got Chernobyl and not, you know, all that crap in that evaporated salt. So only eat salt mined from under the earth. Don't eat modern ocean evaporated salt. And unless company using that, you don't really know what you're eating. That you can minimize it that way. Also, it's much easier to get microplastics into plant things, especially things that are ground up, like ground wheat, ground corn, ground rye. You definitely can get microplastics in that much easier than you can get microplastics inside of a ribeye steak. So by eating a proper human diet, you're going to minimize that, but you're still going to have some. I'm sorry. It is ubiquitous.
A lot of people knock grains, obviously you too, but they will basically never mention that you can sprout grains, change the way
you can change the inflammatory component of grains by
Yes.
sprouting them. Yes, absolutely. And you can change the inflammatory component of nuts and seeds by soaking them, by roasting them, by sprouting them. That is absolutely true. But what you cannot change is the carbohydrate content. It doesn't change at all. Back when I was first going down this journey, I used to eat Ezekiel bread. You know what that is? Yeah, it's delicious. And I thought I was hitting a home fucking run because it was sprouted. And I never stopped to look at the carb count because it's exactly the same as bunny bread. There's no difference. And so, yes, that improved this part of a proper human diet by sprouting grains, roasting seeds, rinsing them, soaking them, all that stuff does improve this, but it doesn't change this at all. Good question. If you still want to eat Ezekiel bread, it's fine. You're a grown-ass human.
No, I think no one really knows, but some people think that a lot of some ancient societies, there were early agricultural societies, actually ate most of their grains sprouted or fermented. They would lightly sprout and ferment, lay them in the sun, and that's how they first started making flatbreads. They would just put them out in the sun, wet, and they would.
Yeah, and that does decrease the inflammatory component, but it does not change the sugar content, the starch content, the carbohydrate content. And Jack actually alluded to this indirectly when he was talking about the Egyptians and their disease. So the Egyptians did not have modern GMO wheat. They had emmer wheat. They had ancient wheat, and they absolutely ground it on rocks, and they dried it in the sun. They did all that shit. And so the thing you got to know about Egyptian society back then is unless you were a slave or a prisoner, you got a 5 degree. Arid, very dry, so you just last forever. You could buy a mummy for like $10. A literal Egyptian mummy back in the day before we had better sense. And they would ship your ass a mummy from Egypt for $10, which, $10 back then was a little different than $10 now. But we can do CAT scans on all those guys and MRIs, and they all had severe coronary artery disease. What diet did they eat? They ate the literal diet that the American Heart Association recommends. They didn't eat red meat. They used the cows to pull shit around. Okay. They ate a little bit of fowl. They ate a little bit of fish. They ate mostly grains, right? Emmer wheat, not GMO wheat. Stone ground, non-GMO, organic wheat. They ate so much wheat that other cultures called them the bread people, right? But every time you do an MRI or a CAT scan of a mummy, heart riddled with heart disease. You look at their teeth, multiple dental recesses, multiple cavities. Yeah, and the worn down parts because of the sand that came from grinding it up. I'm not going to fault them for that. I mean, you got to grind your grains, right? But it didn't fix this. And so they had severe heart disease and severe dental disease because of the starch breaks down into sugar. I don't give a fuck how ancient the grain is. Starch is long chains of sugar. Does that make sense?
I need to know.
Yeah, less bad does not equal good.
On the same line, if we're trying any better than Pop-Tarts and the other bullshit that my grandparents and their grandparents want to give them as a treat? And how do we convince them that feeding our kids is not, like, feeding our children poison is not in their best interest?
Right.
Is an orange really poison? And if we're gonna poison them, is there a better time of day to do it?
I like this guy. That's good.
Binge on Friday and then cut it out the rest of the week, or is it okay to have a little bit every day, breakfast or dinner? Like, when am I killing them? When am I doing the bad?
Yes, sir.
Can we let him answer first and let you answer the mic?
Yeah. Okay. So fruit is a conundrum for many people because fruit grows on trees. How can you get more? That's about as natural as you can get. It literally grew on a tree, Dr. Berry. How is that not natural? How is that not ancestrally appropriate? I'm sure in Jack's research, he looked up some ancient fruit versus modern fruit. Okay. Any of you guys know what possum grapes are? Wild grapes. They're about that big around, and they taste like coal. They're awful. Possum love them. That's why we call them possum grapes, at least in Tennessee. Do y'all have unarmored armadillos here? Do you have possums? You do? Okay. I didn't know if you did. So that's a naturally occurring grape. It is much lower in sugar. It is much less sweet. It is much less visually appealing. Now, those big green fuckers that Dorothy put over there on the table that had no seeds, about this big around, that's just a sack of sugar. Human beings we've been selectively breeding and crossbreeding, and now GMO. GMO is just the next step. And we get what we want out of plants, right? So what used to be this big around and maybe had 1 gram of carb is now this big around, has no seeds, tastes delicious, and has 4 grams of carbs. You see the problem there? So if you want to feed your kids possum grapes, they will not thank you. But that's ancestrally appropriate, right? Same goes for bananas. They used to be about this big, full of seeds, not sweet at all. Now they're this big, no seeds, and pure sugar. So the fruit that we have in the grocery store in no way resembles ancient fruit that we would have had access to greater than 15,000 years. I actually just learned this morning, that not only do humans selectively breed plants, animals also do this as well. Do you know how they do it? When they find a particular apple tree or a particular grapevine or a particular mango or whatever that's super sweet, super color, they eat that and then shit the seeds out. They're more likely to eat that. So it's not just us selectively breeding. The animals have been doing this for hundreds of thousands of years. And I was recently on a podcast with another physician talking about this. Like, no, we've been selectively breeding plants for at least 15,000 years. And he just didn't believe it. He's like, no, I live in the jungle in Costa Rica. There's no, it's out in the jungle. And I'm like, dude, to you, it's out in the jungle. But you know what they called it 15,000 years ago? Home. That's where they fucking lived. What are you talking about? That's where they were literally selecting and crossbreeding and maybe not crossbreeding, definitely not grafting, but they would plant the seeds of an especially sweet fruit everywhere because they wanted more of that because it tastes good. Go ahead.
Okay. Okay. As far as feeding your kids fruits, if you're going to do that, do it when it is seasonally appropriate. Don't get this stuff that's not available in Texas in January, in December, because it doesn't grow here. Get something seasonally when it's available and limit it to that period. And number 2,
less bad than the Twinkies. And as Jack and I said earlier, less bad does not equal good. So if the grandparents must give them a treat, let it be fruit, preferably berries, because they still have a slightly more vitamins and minerals. A big banana is literally a sack of rancid sugar. There's literally, potassium. Fuck you. Eat an avocado, okay?
No, bananas are not good sources of potassium. No, that's another man. Big green grapes that are seedless, that is not in any way a nutritious, natural, ancestrally appropriate snack. But it's probably slightly less bad than the ding dongs. Yeah, that's your fight, my
okay,
friend.
do we have a family psychologist in the room?
That's your fight.
That
so
is-
I would
that's
definitely,
only you can decide
I would
that.
definitely fight my father-in-law with the Twinkies and ding dongs. We would come to blows over that if need be. The fruit, if you can compromise and say stick to strawberries, blueberries, raspberries, blackberries, that's fine. I'm never going to fight you if they can have a few of those. Maybe make that compromise. Then like a grandmotherly duty, but it's like if I come over there and they're eating Twinkies, I'm going to kick somebody in the head.
What I feel like doing, but if giving them fruit is not going to be that much of an improvement, I've always felt that way. Just give them real fruit. But you're saying the carb spike is going to do
100%. Yeah. Yeah.
damage either way.
Yep.
It's like, all right, fine. Once a week, give them some fruit snacks, and I won't bother you anymore.
Yeah. Once a week. That's the key. Once a week. Yeah. 100%. Yeah. Fruit leathers or little fruit chewies. Yeah, it's fine. Once a week.
Okay, we can take one from online.
We can kind of combine a couple of these. One's asking about a mainly venison diet as far as go, and another one is cured bacon. Okay, as far as like the nitrates and preservatives.
So yeah, I've actually have a YouTube video about bacon and how it's actually a health food. Okay, so bacon is not a processed food. You literally cut it off the hog's belly and you slice it up and you put some salt on it. And then that's literally what bacon is. That's not a processed food. They try to lump it in with processed food. That's bullshit. Okay. It is literally, you can see the grain of the meat. That is not a processed food. Okay. So the nitrates in bacon they're not bad for you. They're actually lower your blood pressure. A couple of the big pharmaceutical houses are trying to come up with a pill that contains nitrates because they know that it converts into nitric oxide, which lowers your blood pressure. So they will literally vilify bacon because it has nitrates in it as they concurrently work on a pill that contains fucking nitrates because they know it lowers your blood pressure. I'm not kidding you. Also, uncured bacon. You guys all know this is bullshit, right? They use celery powder to uncure it. It's still cured, okay? Guess what celery powder is sky high in? Get it? But the federal government allows them to say that it's uncured bacon. And even you can put nitrate free. I shit you not. On the package, it's literal celery powder that is just full of nitrates. That's the truth of the matter. So bacon, what was the other part? Oh, venison. Yes. Okay. So every single animal Jack showed you that we've eaten for 99.99% of our time on this planet contain lots of what? Fat. They were fatty animals. In some cases, like as walrus or whale, like blubber fat. Okay. Venison's very lean. Venison is nutritionally very, very good, except it's very low in fat. So you can have venison every meal. Deer is a ruminant. That's fine. But you're going to have to wrap it in some bacon, or you're going to have to cook it in butter, render the tallow and use that. How much tallow you get off a deer? Like 8 ounces?
Oh, no.
It ain't much.
Northern deer.
Maybe up north.
You get a couple, like 2-quart jars.
Okay, out of a northern deer.
Yeah,
but the deer in Tennessee.
In Tennessee, if they've just
maybe a half
been
cup.
gorging on nuts and berries, they have a lot more. I've had that same result in Tennessee one time in a year where we had lots of nuts.
In a year of plenty. Yeah. Yeah.
It was about 110-pound deer. I got a pint.
Yeah. So rabbit, deer, pork. Pork is too lean. Pork is too lean. Elk's too lean. Yeah, you've got to have more fat. There's actually a thing known as rabbit starvation in the survival community. If you eat low fat for too long, you'll get sick.
One quick venison comment.
If you want to get the fat content of your venison up, like when you get ground, oftentimes like your processors will also be fat they've cut off beef,
Yep.
so you can
Yep.
ask for like scrap
Yep.
beef tallow or
Yep.
beef
And
fat.
often you can
add
get
into
that for
your
free.
brine. Yeah, for sure, or super cheap.
Yeah, because nobody wants the fat because that's bad for you. So you can literally get pure beef fat, and they'll grind it up with your venison for free. You can also grind up bacon with the venison. That's pretty damn good. Or pork shoulder, absolutely. There's lots of ways to put more fat in it. And so, do you see how all the animals we have left in the wild now are very lean? They're very small and very lean. And that's why I want to, and I'd love to talk more about, did we kill them all or was it something else? The only animals still running around are the ones that are really fucking fast and lean and don't have a lot of fat because we weren't really interested in them, and also we couldn't catch them. They're huge, no doubt, no doubt.
Bears would be the one.
Yeah.
that have the most fat on
Yeah, they have a lot of fat. Yep. Right.
I gave up sugar recently, and
Good man. That's a great first step.
I put a lot of honey as a replacement.
Uh-huh.
How bad is that? Or
So, what's honey made of?
bee vomit?
Yeah, it is beef. What?
It's sugar from
It's
flowers.
pure sugar. Yeah. Well, agave nectar, and this is an honest mistake that many people who are trying to be healthier, they'll get rid of all the sugar bowl like Granny used to have on the and use honey to put in their coffee. It's literally pure sugar. Agave nectar. Oh, it's organic, Jack. It's pure sugar. Yeah, dog shit's organic. It doesn't matter. It's pure sugar. So sugar is sugar. Sugar does not care if you know it's sugar or not. It's still going to spike your blood sugar and cause you to have fatty liver. So yeah, honey, a lot of people get, they're like, that's like talking bad about somebody's mama. For some people, it's like, what's wrong with you? What do you think honey is? It is, I mean, bees' wings beat how many times a minute? They need pure sugar, just like hummingbirds. We ain't them. We don't need that. We will get fatty liver and we'll start to get pre-diabetic if we eat that. So give your honey to your neighbor and stop that. Grow up. You don't need sugar.
Hi, two parts. One is, does olive oil fall into that observational study thing?
Yeah, it does actually. And one of the studies that I'm talking about, I'm going to talk about groups. Okay. They had 80 guys and they broke them up into roughly 3 equal groups. One had saturated animal fat. One group had olive oil and one group had corn oil. So at the end, they were going to run the study for 3 years, but they stopped at 2 years because so many people in the corn oil group had died that they weren't going to be able to get good numbers from the research. Their N had gotten too small. And so 57% of the corn oil guys had died after 2 years. 52% of the olive oil guys had died. 7 animal fat guys are still alive. And this is all 80 had a previous heart attack. So it looks like that olive oil is less bad than corn oil. And a lot of people on keto, they're like, no, olive oil, avocado oil, coconut oil, those are good. Yeah, they're way the hell better than canola, corn oil, soybeans, safflower, sunflower. Yes, they are. But I think human beings need animal fat. That's what you need. That's what we evolved on. That's what we thrived on. Those Indians that made me and Jack look like short guys, they ate animal fat. They didn't have no olive oil. And for 6,000 years.
So what I would add to that, I don't think that necessarily the olive oil or the avocado oil is truly harmful, but it can't make up where you're getting the majority of your fat calories from.
Exactly.
The research I've looked at, it doesn't look like it's like a toxin.
Right, I agree.
But it doesn't give you what you need,
I
right?
agree.
It doesn't have electrolytes that your body craves, right? You know, it's not Barando. And so I think that it less bad. Maybe it's just that it's not bad, but it can't be, you know, we say you need to get the majority of your calories from fat.
Yep.
You can't make it up with olive.
Avocado oil are less good than saturated animal fat. I think they're good. I think they're okay, but they're not as good as saturated animal fat for Homo sapiens sapiens. That's what you are. Did you know that?
And so second part is I grow figs, pears, and
Yep.
watermelons. I mean, is that like
Me too. Yeah, I love them. Once a year, I'll eat a couple of pears. I'll eat 3 or 4 figs when they're ripe in Tennessee, and then I don't touch them again until the next year. But to in any way apply hydrate count of figs. Figs are good, but dude, they are pure sugar. Pure sugar.
Pure sugar
So
deliciousness.
yeah, eat a few and then don't touch them again until next year.
So I have a calorie question.
Yeah, I actually turn my figs and pears into eggs. That's what I do with them on my farm. The chickens eat them, and then I eat the eggs. Go ahead.
I have a calorie question. So I won't say I switched 100% to carnivore, but obviously I cut down significantly on
Yep.
my carbs.
Yep.
And for a month, I pretty much was all carnivore, and I felt great. And I'm still kind of maintaining that diet. However, when I go all carnivore, I'm not hungry. I always fast till about 11 o'clock or so, and I have eggs and meat for breakfast. But then I realize I'm not snacking throughout the day, and I get to like 8, 9 o'clock at night, and like shit, I haven't eaten anything, but I'm not really hungry, so I guess I'll just go to bed. It's good because I dropped about 15 pounds in a matter of about a month.
Yep.
But is that bad long term, or just
If
it
you
is what it is? If I'm not hungry, don't eat.
Yeah, if you still got more stored fat on your body than you would like to have, then that's 100% not bad. Now, if you look like Nick Ferguson, then you probably don't need to fast too often. Right? He's muscly too. I love you, Nick. But he's put on some weight. But so fasting is very good for you, and I could talk for another 2 hours about fasting. But some of us in this room, we need to really consider intermittent fasting. And others of us, you could do that if you want to. Yes.
I have some real problems with insomnia on keto. Like I'll go to sleep, but then I'll wake up at 2 a.m. and be full of energy.
Yep.
And then it just starts to accumulate.
Yeah.
I get cumulatively worse insomnia. Is there anything I can do about that?
Yeah. And during the day, the next day, you weren't tired. Did you take a nap? Did you fall asleep at red lights?
Yeah, in the middle of the day, like a lunch nap kind of.
Gotcha. So for some people, anytime they change their diet, they switch into a diet mentality, and they'll start to portion control, and they'll start to even unconsciously calorie restrict, right? And then also, it's very easy on keto and carnivore to not eat enough fat. And your brain, when you're keto, you've got to eat the fat. Okay, you can't make it low carb and low fat, because then you rabbit starvation. That, and they're not tired the next day. They're like full of energy, ready to go. Okay. Sleep is very interesting because the gurus will say you need 8 hours by God every night. That's it, or you'll die prematurely. You should always ask, what research is that based on? Not much. Now, there is some research that shows between 6 and 9 hours is the sweet spot for humans. That's where it seems we do best. But did you know that just even a few hundred years ago, we had something called second sleep? You ever heard of that? Yeah. So no, we would go to bed at dark because it was dark and we didn't have lights. You went to bed, you had sex, and you went to bed. That's what you did. And then you would wake up about 1 or 2, 3, somewhere in there. You would get up, maybe have sex again. You would stoke the fire. You would go out and check on the animals. In some cases, and so this is recorded back in like the 1100 AD, right in their journal. It's like, and they would say things like, before second sleep, I went to see my new neighbor. They literally get dressed and go visit the neighbors for an hour or two, and then come back home, and then have sex again, and then have second sleep. And so it's called biphasic sleep. And there's a ton of research that's now being done that maybe that's a more ancestrally appropriate way to sleep, is to have 2 biphasic periods of sleep of 3 hours and 4 hours, or 4 and 3. Who nobody know. We don't know. But there's lots of evidence that humans, think about it, 100,000 years ago, you think you could just literally pass out and sleep dead for hours? That's probably not evolutionarily advantageous. That'd probably get you eaten back in the day. Yeah, but you had to have somebody up, or something bad would happen.
Oh, yeah, you can hold on to it. It's all yours. So I'm doing a little bit of the 1 + 1 = 2 thing that you mentioned earlier too. So for me, I used to do some competitive endurance sports, and for me, superfoods were like beets and salmon. Those always gave me great performance. I felt great when I ate them.
You said beets?
Beets, yeah,
Yeah,
red
beets,
and salmon.
yep,
So
yep.
I'm kind of wondering, where did those fall on like the villain scale? And then as a
Yeah,
kind of-
salmon is a superfood. Eat salmon.
All
If
the
you
time.
can, from smaller salmon that haven't concentrated the mercury, you don't want to be eating the big trophy salmon. You want to eat smaller salmon. So typically salmon in the can, the cheap salmon, that's typically better for you and lower in mercury than the big pretty salmon at Whole Foods.
Well, I guess then the second,
And then beets, super high in sugar, super high in carbs. If you're doing some type of inappropriate sustained exercise, because none of our ancestors ran half marathons or marathons. They never did that. They might do it once, right? Because of that one time that thing happened and they had to do that. But to go out and do that daily or weekly, if you came to in my tribe 50,000 years ago and you're like, hey, you want to go run 17 miles? We would probably kick you in the nuts and push you off the cliff. For what? What's chasing us? What are you talking about? Right? So humans do lots of dumb shit. And I'm just playing with you. I'm just messing with you. Don't get upset. But we do lots of ancestrally inappropriate things. And that doesn't mean it's healthy. And in fact, a lot of the former long distance runners now call it chronic cardio. They're like, this is not good for you. It's not good for your joints. It's not good for longevity. Chronic long distance runners die prematurely very, very often. And so in a case like that, need to eat an inappropriate food in order to have sustained inappropriate activity.
Yeah. So the second part of that too is how much flexibility is there? In
Yeah,
your
it's a good
diet,
question.
paradigm,
So yes, thank you for asking that. I don't want to go away from here, you guys thinking that I'm saying that a proper human diet is carnivore. I'm not saying that. A proper human diet has a carbohydrate spectrum from somewhere between 100 total grams of carbohydrates that are naturally occurring real carbohydrates in unprocessed food, right? So vegetables, a few berries, a few nuts. Yeah, nuts got carbs. All the way down to 50 total grams, 20 total grams, carbs close to 0 grams as you can get. There's a spectrum. So somebody like him who's running 17 miles a day, or who's training for Mr. Olympia, doing insane amounts of exercise, carnivore may not be perfect for them, or it may be perfect for them, or it may be perfect for them for parts of their training, but not for other parts of their training, right? And so if you're doing some kind of elite level training, you might need to ramp up the naturally occurring carbs in something like beets in order to be able to do sustained inappropriate activity. Does that make sense? And so proper human diet's not carnivore. Carnivore is part of it, but so is keto, low carb. That's the spectrum from low carb to carnivore. That's a proper human diet spectrum.
That would be circumstance, and then
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Variability though, in like physiology, basically somebody's baseline, or do you think that this is pretty much?
Well, there are several distance runners, and there's one ultra marathoner now that are carnivore 11 months out of the year. And then when they're training for the big one, they'll bump the carbs up while they're training and then while they run it. But then they're right back to carnivore for the rest of the year. And one of the guys currently holds the world record distance, like 50 or 100 miles, some kind of insane amount of mileage. Exactly. He just doesn't have that gene. Yeah, exactly. But he's carnivore the vast majority of the time. And then he will eat some naturally occurring carbs like beets when he's in the heat of battle, so to speak. But on a daily basis, he eats carnivore. Yeah.
We're getting low on time, so let's keep it short, guys.
do you have a preference in terms of like cooking oils or fat additives between like tallow versus butter or
Yeah, I think ruminant fat's probably the best, but I think also butter is just anything bad about butter. Now, drinking milk as an adult is ancestrally inappropriate and dumb. Milk is meant to make mammals gain weight and get fat. That's what it's for. But the fat component, the fat macro in dairy is pristine. If you can get the carbs out and get the protein out and just have the fat, that's butter basically, or ghee. That's primo. You can't beat that. Okay. But at my house, we cook in bacon grease, butter, beef tallow, also duck grease, sheep's grease, any of that, goose, all that's great. But I think probably, and I don't know this, that's why I'm saying probably, I think probably ruminant fat is probably the best of any fat that a human being can ingest. But I don't know that, but that's my current belief.
Is there a top 5 list you could give for most offensive, worst things that you should target for elimination as we're working our way off?
Yeah, absolutely. So first and foremost is sugar of any kind, definitely added, but also naturally occurring. Get all the sugar out of your diet. That is step 1 towards a proper human diet. Got that? Step 2 is to remove all grains from your diet, including ancient grains, including sprouted grains and soaked grains, and grains that Spirit rubbed his butt cheeks on. They're still high carb. And unless you process them properly, they're still going to be inflammatory. Stop all sugar. Stop all grains. Number 3, stop all vegetable oils. For some of us, that includes olive and avocado, because for me, I have some inflammation with them. Not as much as canola and corn oil and soybean oil, but still, I do best on animal fat. And you might be able to eat avocado just fine in olive, or maybe not. You need to do that experiment. That's the first 3 steps. Step 4 is to cover at least half of your plate with fatty red meat. That's step 4. That's the first 4 steps. If those 4 steps consistently, you'll have to get your old pants out of the back of the closet. Just those 4 steps alone. And then there's hundreds of other tweaks and experiments that you can do, that I talk about, that Jack talks about, that other people in this space talk about.
I just wanted to give you an opportunity before you mentioned fasting, that you could talk about that for a couple hours. I'd planned to ask you about extended fasting, turning on autophagy, and as a means to improve your health, improve arthritis, perhaps, and extend your.
So the word autophagy, what that means is that if you've got an old, worn out, damaged cell right here, your body has the ability to go in there and harvest that cell and break it down into its parts, just like a scavenger picking up aluminum cans beside the road, or they stole that old jalopy out of their neighbor's pasture and sold it for scrap. Your body does that, okay? It does it more when you fast. It's called autophagy. And so any older cell, any damaged cell, any cell that's malfunctioning, your body it knows that, because it puts markers on. So your body goes around looking for those cells that are like, hey, I'm not doing well here. And they reclaim those and break them down. And then they use those parts to build new healthy cells. Autophagy. Now there's something else called mitophagy. So mitochondria are the powerhouses of your cell. That's what gives you energy, right? So runners are very interested in that. Lifters very interested, hikers. So mitochondria also, did you know that mitochondria are captured bacteria back hundreds of millions of years ago? But there could be no human beings if we didn't have mitochondria in the cell. And mitochondria has its own DNA. Yeah, that's how far down the rabbit hole I've been. Okay. But mitochondria get old too. And when you fast for long enough, you start to ramp up something called mitophagy, where those cells will actually start to label, this mitochondria is not putting out the energy, not putting out the ATP. And that cell will actually break it down through the lysosome and use those parts to make a brand new healthy mitochondria. And so fasting is powerful, especially if you've got an autoimmune condition, an inflammatory condition, if you're just fat as fuck. Any of those things respond beautifully to fast like hours a day. I either eat 1 or 2 meals a day, depending on family and other stuff. Some people go for days. They'll do a 3-day fast once a week, right? So if any of you guys are obese or severely obese, once you start eating enough protein and fat, because those are the most satiating macronutrients, it becomes easy to fast for longer. Just like he said, a lot of times I'm like, well, shit, it's time to eat, but I'm not even hungry. That's the power of a proper human diet. You're not a slave to the kitchen anymore. If I talked about this last time with Jack, if I said, Jack, the shit is we can't carry any food, me and Jack would be fine with that. We may not love it. We'd be totally fine. We could, yeah, we could, but we could perform at optimal peak performance. We'd be fine. But somebody who's still a sugar slave, a carbohydrate slave, what would they be wanting to do after 2 hours or 4 hours? They'd be like, did you bring the food? Jack be like, dude, I told you we ain't got room for food. I'm sorry. They'd be like, so you're telling me I can't eat for 3 days? They would literally, they'd have a mental breakdown because they're a slave to. Fasting is a superpower. Fasting can heal things that your doctor would never believe it could heal. But not all of us need to do longer fasts. Some people do 5-day fasts once a month, or a 7-day fast once a month. There's tons of literature to support it, tons of research that shows that it does the things I just said it did. And there's several books. Dr. Jason Fung wrote an excellent book on fasting. Okay, so check that out if you're interested in that.
All right, let's give jazz hands to Doc Barry.
Thank you.
Will you be around for more questions tonight?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much. We can end the live stream. And we'll be back.